Welcome to session 2 of looking at the book When Helping Hurts. Just like last week, I'm going to do a little bit of commentary to begin this session, and then Angela and I will sit down and have a discussion around this commentary. Last week, if you remember, we looked very hard at all the scripture in the Old Testament and New Testament that gives us the mandate to help those in poverty especially. We also looked at the great reversal that at the beginning of the 20th century that evangelicals and missionaries switched from being a primarily kind of equal way of doing social justice and helping those in poverty and other issues like that alongside evangelism to just being strict evangelists. In other words, we'll save your soul, but we're not too interested in feeding your stomachs. We delved into that a lot. Well, today I want to begin by telling you about a young girl named Elisa. In the 1990s, she lived in one of the most dangerous cities in America, the inner city of Chicago. She lived there in public housing, and she became pregnant at the age of 16. Of course, she dropped out of high school and began collecting her own welfare checks. She had 5 children eventually, and none of the fathers helped her with child rearing. The environment that she was raising her own children in were characterized by widespread substance abuse, failing schools, high rates of unemployment, rampant violence, teenage pregnancy, and a complete absence of role models. We can all just sit back and judge poor decisions made by people. But I thought of that and I thought, when I make a poor decision, it is not life-destroying or life-breaking. But for many people, they are one bad decision from it really breaking their lives. And the system doesn't help either. Of course, for this young girl, trying to find a job was difficult. I mean, if you don't have a high school education, number one, it made it difficult, and there were no decent paying jobs to begin with. You add that to a welfare system that penalizes her for earning money, taking away benefits for every dollar that she earns and every asset that she acquires. And then, of course, a huge, huge problem is childcare. Not only the availability of childcare, ask our church. Our center is almost always has people on a waiting list. It's hard to find, and it's also not affordable to a good number of people. So there is a problem in America. Poverty alleviation is the ministry of reconciling people. It is the reconciliation ministry, moving people closer to glorifying God by living in right relationships with God and with yourself and with others and the rest of creation. Our goal is not to make the materially poor in the world or in the United States upper class people or even rich people. Because, of course, those groups are poor in their own ways. Those with lots of money are often caught up in myriads of divorces, substance abuse, and mental illness as well. So that's not our goal, is to give people the opportunity to be rich. It is to be in the right relationship with God and with themselves and with others. To restore people to a full expression of humanness, the way God created us all to be. People and processes are not projects or products. The goal here is to see people restored to being what God created them to be. They are created in God's image, so they have gifts and abilities and the capacity to make decisions and to affect change in the world around them. And they can be stewards of their own lives. But we have a broken American system. In the early 1950s, the African American sections of our inner cities were largely viable and very stable communities. However, the federal urban renewal and highway programs required that the inner cities and often African American neighborhoods to be torn down as they built those highway systems. The Federal Housing Administration then began to offer subsidized mortgages to millions of Caucasians to purchase homes in the suburbs and then flee the cities. And then, of course, what happened? The jobs left. The manufacturing economy moved to a service economy. And from 1970 to 1985, millions of high-paying blue-collar jobs simply disappeared from inner cities, moving to other parts of the country or overseas. Unemployment in inner cities skyrocketed, and many African American inner city residents joined the welfare rolls, a system, again, that penalizes them for working by taking away benefits for every dollar they earn. So, which came first, the broken individual or the broken system? What happens when society crams historically oppressed, uneducated, unemployed, and relatively young human beings into high-rise buildings, takes away their leaders, provides them with inferior education and health care and employment systems, and then pays them not to work? Not all poverty is created equal. Different situations require different kinds of help. Most of these situations need three things: either relief, rehabilitation, or development. Relief can be defined as the urgent or temporary provision of emergency aid to reduce immediate suffering from a natural or a man-made crisis. Rehabilitation. It begins as soon as that demand stops, and it seeks to restore people and their communities to the positive elements of their pre-crisis conditions. Development is the process of ongoing change that moves all the people involved, those that are helping and those that are being helped, closer to being in a right relationship with God and themselves and the rest of creation. And particularly, as the materially poor develop, they are better able to fulfill their own calling to glorify God by working and supporting themselves and their families with the fruits of their work. Development is not done to people or even for people. Listen to this. It is done with people. A very small percentage of the poor in our communities need relief. Often the people that need relief are those that are severely disabled, some of the elderly, some very young, orphan children, or mentally ill, homeless populations, or those that are drug addicted, or those that are victims of natural disasters. These people do need relief. So, how do you spell effective relief? It does need to be immediate. I know when Jack was a child, Jack is 10 years younger than William and Patterson, and as they were growing up together, I can't tell you how many times we had to tell William and Patterson, you are not the parent of Jack. We are. You be his friend, we'll be his parent. You be his friend, and we will be his parent. Well, that kind of thing is exactly what we need in this situation when it comes to working with those in need. They have parents. We need to be their friend. A lot of times we practice what's called labor paternalism, and it occurs when we do work for people that they can do for themselves. There's also managerial paternalism. And it's probably the hardest to break away from. We middle class, upper class North Americans, we like to see things get done quickly and in an efficient order. Relative to a lot of other cultures, including many low-income communities in North America, we are prone to take charge, particularly when it appears that nobody is moving fast enough. That's called managerial paternalism. Remember that the goal is not to produce houses or to produce material goods, but to pursue a process of walking with the materially poor so that they're better stewards of their own lives and communities. We walk with them to get housing. We work with them to provide material goods. We work with them in so many of these situations. Let me say that again. The goal is not to produce material goods, but to produce a process of walking with the materially poor. So the question is, are the people destitute, or can they contribute to their own improvement? Relationships is hard, and that's what we're going to look at next, is how can we build relationships with the poor in order to walk alongside them, in order to uplift them. Of course, Jesus knew this was true. I love the story that Jesus tells as he's sitting around a dinner table and he's looking at his disciples and this woman that's washing his hair and his feet. And what does Jesus say? The poor will always be with you. Some people interpret that to mean, well, there's always going to be poor people. Jesus said so there's no reason to try to help. They're always going to be here. No. I think what Jesus was saying is, if you follow me and you're sitting around the table filled with food that you purchased and you made, then of course the poor are going to be with you. There will always be poor with you. They will be at your table sharing your food. We'll look at that next week. But right now, let's invite Angela into this conversation. Welcome back with Angela and I. I was just talking off camera about a story about relationships. Mm-hmm. Basically, these chapters are talking about that the best way to be helpful to an individual or a community in poverty is to do that in relationships. I know years ago, Lucy and I met a couple. They were both deaf, mm-hmm. and I know sign language, so we were able to talk to each other. They had two girls, young girls, and they were in extreme poverty. And over a couple of years of relationship, we were able to move this couple into a home. Lucy was able to teach this couple really good budgeting, mm-hmm. ways of budgeting and saving money. She used the envelope system with them. And they were making great progress, and it was a good relationship. However, one day we went to talk with them, and they had disappeared,
just gone,
and we never saw them again. And they left everything. They left the furniture. They left the house. They left photo albums of their families when their children were little. They left everything. So for us, it was a huge mystery. Our assumption was that we made an assumption about them that was probably not true. Mm-hmm. And that either we moved too fast or it was just too hard a way of living for them to do at that time in their lives. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I think what we don't understand, that even our best intentions may not be the best for the people we are trying to serve.
Right.
When you talk about relationships, I've got two stories, two comparisons where relationship is really the key to success.
Right.
In one country, somebody came in and decided that this community needed water filters. And I'm sure that they did. I mean, clean water is key to family dynamics and stopping preventable disease.
Right.
Clean running water is just key. So this group came in and installed all these water filters, and then they left. Well, a year later, the community was like, come back and fix your water filters. Come back and fix them because they're not working and we don't have clean water. Well, by then the team had moved on, doing other things, and they're like, well, we can't come back. They're your water filters. You can fix them. And no, we're done.
Wow.
So yeah. So that's example
Right.
of one way to say, hey, I know what you need.
Right.
And we're going to give it to you.
Right. And they were thinking these are your water filters, not ours.
Right. But then there's a group that I worked with. They were American Baptist missionaries, but they had developed this group in Thailand that was completely run by Thai and Hill Tribe people, village folks.
Right.
And they would help identify villages way up in the mountains that could use clean water, running water. They would talk with the villagers and assess the needs and go back and forth with the villagers on what they thought they needed.
Right.
So when it was decided that they would like clean water, a committee was formed in the village of villagers, leaders, and they were responsible for helping this happen. And every villager contributed some little funds, what they could afford, to start building up a purse to help with repairs when it was time. And they worked with, the group worked with the villagers to decide where to put the piping, where to place different faucet pads, where to place new latrines. So it was completely with the community. Some Western teams would come in to help, but they don't need the Western people's help to get the job done. And every member of the village, at least one member of the family, had to help build this water system. So they really owned it. And I think the difference between the first example and the second is not only the ownership of it, but the dignity that they get from saying this is ours.
Right.
And knowing from the very start that this is not a gift.
Right.
It is something they are working towards to help their own families.
Right. And we say this often in our office, when you know better, you do better. One of the reasons that we partner with Triune Mercy Center is because they work with the homeless in Greenville, but they work out of relationship with the homeless in Greenville. And so that's one reason we partner with them in working with the homeless.
And I think that is key to any group that you work with, is you work with the group. You don't necessarily work with the individual people, because like Triune, they know their people. They have a relationship with them.
Right.
Even if we wanted to donate clothes, we would not give them to the people at Triune, the homeless at Triune. We give them to the management at Triune for them to distribute, because they know everybody's situation better.
Right. Good. All right. So we'll see you next time.
And if anybody wants to talk to either Sam and I more about this book, it's something I think that we're both passionate about, and although you may get into conversations that you wish you hadn't, we would love to chat with you. This is a difficult and controversial subject of how to give appropriately and how to really help without hurting.
Right.
So see you next week.